Rick Beato recently put out a video called The Video I Was Afraid to Make. On the thumbnail, he's sat in his garden, and we know if he goes and sits out in his garden, that means he has been in deep thought. So we're going to get his thoughts and opinions. So do we want to see Rick in his garden, putting forth his opinions to the world, especially when these opinions frighten him a little bit? So, of course, we all clicked on it, and I clicked on it very excitedly to see what he was about to say. And on that video, he made the point that creativity is the domain of the young, and that once you get old, it is more difficult, if not impossible, to be creative. On Facebook this morning, I have seen many of my musicians friends sharing this video. Everybody's discussing it. So I think it's brilliant that Rick has brought this sort of philosophical thinking about art and music into the public domain. And I felt it was only right that me, being me, that I would then throw my two penneth into the hat. Right, which I think I've mixed metaphors there, but I might not have, because you could throw two penneth into a hat, couldn't you? So it might be okay. Anyway, he starts off by saying that usually on his videos, he upsets young people. But on this video, he is going to upset old people. Now, as soon as I saw that, I thought, Rick, I know you've been watching my channel because I have been upsetting old people since day one. I have become an expert. Let's get the English right. An expert on upsetting old people. I know just which bit to poke to upset the old people. And I think saying that old people aren't creative is the least that they've got to worry about. If you really want to upset an old person, remind them that they will be dead soon. That's usually the best place to start. But he didn't go there. Anyway, I invented that. And I think he should have, mentioned me on the channel. I'm waiting for my mention, Rick. You've been mentioned a million times on my channel, and I never seen anything on your channel, even a slight nod to me. The British Rick Beato, as I've now become known. Right, so enough with the frivolities. Let's get serious and actually delve into what he was going to say. So he starts off by listing a bunch of examples from the music industry of people doing groundbreaking albums when they are very young. We get the fact that the Beatles were finished and done before they were 30. We get the idea that Led Zeppelin were in their early 20s. It's something I've mentioned on this channel as well. And it's a very interesting thing that these things that have gone into culture and that we hold so dear, and now we almost revere them. We stick them in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or we go to the Hard Rock Cafe and we go, oh my God, I cannot believe it. It's John Bonham's socks. And we all go, oh, I can't believe it. Like we've seen the knuckle bone of some saint back in medieval times. And it's very interesting to think that these artifacts of worship were created by people so young. And so his argument seems to make sense there. He then goes wider than that and he starts to look at scientists, and he lists a bunch of scientists. And he says that these scientists did all their brilliant work when they were young. Now, I'm not going to point anything out. I'm just going to go through and put his argument forth as we go. But straight away I thought, well, he's picking and choosing his examples. I'm sure we could go through many rock albums and finding examples of albums which were made by people when they're old that are considered brilliant albums. Whether they would be seen as groundbreaking albums is another thing, and I will get onto that in a minute, and I think that's a distinction that Rick didn't make. Anyway, he then brings in these two ideas, psychological ideas, that there's two types of intelligence. The first is fluid intelligence. This is intelligence that reaches out into the world. It's not based upon what you know. It's about exploration, and it's about finding out, how does this work? How does that work? It's a little bit like how a man will try and fix something without looking at the manual. That would be an example of fluid intelligence. Why don't you just look at the manual? I don't need to look at the manual. I'll work it out. But it's in the manual. You could just look at the manual. No, I will work this out in my own way. Or the equivalent would be when you're driving somewhere before the old sat-nav came out. When I grew up, I would go on holiday with my mum and dad. And my dad would be driving around going, I'm sure I know where this place is. And my mum would go, why don't you look on the map? I don't need the map. I've got a very good sense of direction. And so I assume that's what Rick means by fluid intelligence. Then he brings in this idea of crystallized intelligence. This is an intelligence based upon what we know. So if we know how to, I don't know, fix a car because we've studied it for years and years and years and years, we've had so much experience of it. When that car drives onto the drive and we hear that, bap, 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 you go, oh, that'll be the exhaust. Or maybe the tappets are set to the right pressure or something like that. You can tell I know nothing about cars because I'm a rock and roll drummer. Anyway, so he has these two ideas. He goes through those. Then, and it's quite weird then he almost goes against himself. And he starts to look at the great work of classical composers. And it turns out people like Beethoven and Bach made their best work right at the end of their careers. So he then makes a distinction that sort of music is good because it's an example of crystallized intelligence. It's the peak of knowledge. This person has learnt so much that they are, just before they peg it, are able to put all their knowledge into this work of art. And I thought, well, if that's the case, then there's another type of creativity, but we won't get there yet. Right? Then he goes on to jazz musicians, and he makes a distinction that to play jazz, you need to know all this stuff, scales and chords and the phrasing and harmony and all that type of stuff. But improvisation is also made on the spot, so it must contain fluid intelligence because you're doing something on the spot. Right? I don't accept any of that either. So that's his argument. It takes about 10 minutes and then he's out of there. And all the old people who were sat there with their little recording studios in their bedrooms, thought guys would watch this channel, and they got their little band camp, went, oh, not only has Andy been saying there's no music industry and there's no point in even trying, now he's told me that I'm not even a creative person. What is the point? What is the point of being alive? And we return to the thing I said at the top of this video, that the worst thing you can say to an old person is they are close to death, or even worse, that their meaning on this earth is now past. They are a non-entity. They don't need to really be here anymore. Why are you here? I don't know, but I quite like it. I don't want to go. Yeah, but you've been here for a while now, haven't you? I know, but it's quite comfy. And I've got my little recording studio. Yeah, but nobody cares about your recording studio. Well, I know, but I do it for my own pleasure. Yeah, well, why do you need to do it for your own pleasure? Who cares about your own pleasure? You old pleasure monger, you. Go on, Logan's Run. I made a reference to Logan's Run on a video recently, and many of my old viewers appreciated it. It needs no more explanation than that. Anyway, let's get to the top of this and start pulling it apart, just because I may get some views then, and I can bask in the sunshine of Rick's fame, whilst at the same time looking like I'm, coming up all contrarian, even though I'm an old fella and I've got no contrarian left in me, have I? None of us have. We just old. We've done it all. We don't want to change the world. We just want a comfy armchair, a nice cup of tea, and something on the record player to listen to that came from the old days when people used to play instruments before these computers and young people came along, sporting it all, wiggling their bottoms around and singing about sex. I mean, it was all right when Robert Plant did it. Because Robert Plant was a musical genius as he was allowed to, and he was channeling the blues. The blues is good because it's authentic. None of these young people are authentic. They just don't even know who they are, do they? They haven't experienced anything. They don't know anything. They don't know anything about how great our music is. Right, so let's start. So, the list of examples. Now, he could have picked... many artists have done from rock and roll that have done great albums. He himself has had Nuno Bettencourt on the channel, and Nuno Bettencourt is about 60 years old. I know he doesn't look it, but I bet if you get up close, he would look it. But from a distance, he doesn't look it. His hair is still lovely. Unlike mine that's gone a sort of grey colour, his still retains its sheen of blackness, which I think is very impressive. Obviously, he has not had the worries that I have had. Anyway, moving on. Last year, was it? Or was it early this year? I think it was early this year. Extreme brought out what I would say is their best album and blew everybody away. Now, that was a great album. It wasn't reinventing the wheel. But it was a great album. I've just interviewed John Anderson, and John Anderson has come on out after being kicked out of Yes for getting ill, and he has gone, okay, Yes, the band that I formed, I'll show you how to do it properly. And he's done an album called True, and it's brilliant. Bang on the nose of Yes he goes. Absolutely incredible album, but he hasn't reinvented the wheel, right? So it's something I champion on this channel a lot, this idea of reinventing the wheel. And if Rick is calling that creative, so be it. And he may have a point if that's your definition of creativity. But for me, it isn't. My definition of creativity is the balance between hedonism and perfectionism. And you don't want another video where I go on about that for an hour. So if you don't know what I mean, go and check another video out. That's what it does. If you are doing that, then you are making art. And the other thing you need to make art is to put a frame around it. In other words, in terms of music, you need to get it out there and put it on some sort of platform so at least one person can listen to it. If you do that, I believe you are being creative and making art. Whether you have reinvented the wheel, well, I think it's possible for old people to do something new. But it's a very complex argument. It is related to the cultural epoch in which rock and roll emerged. We'll come on to that at the end when I do my little speech on what I think it is. Right, so my knockback to Rick is he's picking examples to prove a point. Then he goes on through the scientists, and I was really troubled by this because he does a little swizz here. So he went, Einstein invented his special, he didn't invent it, he discovered his special theory of relativity in 1905, which he did when he was in his mid-20s. But anybody who knows about science knows that's the rubbish one. It was okay. He was just warming up. It's the general relativity theory in 1916 that is the one that counts. And he was 36 old when he came up with that. That's the one that counts. The other one is good. I couldn't come up with it. You know, you've got to give him a pat on the back. But he wasn't finished. He was, hang on, this is only the special one. It seems very special to us, Einstein. I know it's special, but I'm going to have a general relative theory. General, that doesn't sound as good as special. I think the special one must be better. No, it's the general one will be. But that's just the general, and anyone can come up with that. Well, not really. This one really does pull everything together in a general theory that specifically addresses everything in the universe and ties it all together in a great cosmic whole. And I don't mean by cosmic hole, I don't mean black hole. I mean whole, W-H-O-L-E. I'm putting myself off. So I thought that was a swizz, right? Then he goes on to explain this fluid and crystallized intelligence. Now, this is a theory that goes back to the early 30s, I think. And this is at the early development of cognitive psychology, which came in after sort of behaviorism, sort of Pavlov's dog, and people just do things because they're programmed to do it, and if you feed a dog and then ring a bell, you only have to ring the bell and the dog will go, oh, we must be getting fed, or salivate. Which is, so then we start to look at how we understand things. That's what cognition is. This is a theory of understanding, okay? And I don't think you can automatically apply it to creativity, which I do not think is about you understanding how the world works. I think that is the domain of science. I think art does something else. And I think you don't have to have an understanding of the world in a cognitive sense to react to it and present it as being your reaction. Of course, there's a great deal of understanding often to develop the skills that are required to get your expression out there. But those skills are not the art. And I must admit, I think that is the big problem with Rick Beato. Is he has come up through a certain period of time where the skills required to make music became so impressive that there is a respect that develops where you go, oh my God, this music's incredible. Or why is it incredible? It's because they're brilliant, because they have this skill. And to get this skill, they would have needed understanding. So, to be creative, you've got to have an understanding of music. And so if you can understand something, there's these two types of cognition. There's fluid and crystallized, right? Now, there was an educational theorist that came in after the guys that had come up with this one, which I don't know their names, called Piaget. And Piaget develops this idea and he links it more to sort of environment and inherited heritable traits. And so he looks at the way human beings are evolved and how as we grow through life, we are wired to learn things in a certain way. I'm going to give you an example of this if I can. So when a child's born, they can you can sit them in your little house or your commune or in your family, and as long as there's nothing wrong with them, they will learn to walk and they will learn to talk of their own volition, because that is wired in. We have a wired in heritable trait to learn those things. The ability to speak and understand language is wired into us, right? And therefore, so is a whole bunch of other stuff. And we can see that children develop those skills easily and do not need educational framework to come in and make them learn it. When it comes to reading and writing and arithmetic, those three things, there is no wired thing in there. So you could stick someone in a house surrounded by books and they won't necessarily learn to read. To learn to read, you have to hijack the motivational process that was wired in to learn to walk. So I think this is far more complex than this simple fluid and crystallized approach describes. And on this channel, I've tried to delve into that. And I've also explored this idea of evolved perception of the world, which divides into sort of time and space, or the rational, the irrational, the emotional, and the logical. You know, I've tried to look at that dialectic, and I've tried to explore how art actually tries to bring those two things together, which in normal life are best separated because we tend to analyze and understand the world by separating these two things into two separate factions. So what the scientist is trying to do is they're trying to create a God's eye view of the world, which is actually taking all the subjectivity out of it and be able to stand back and see things as they really are, which of course is an invention of humans to see things as they really are. And then the phenomenologists come on and go, well, surely human experiences is what really is. And then you get that sort of postmodern view of the world, where it's all about our view and we construct our world and it's constructed about all that sort of stuff is in there. And I think it's just too simplistic to think that you've solved it with this one theory, okay? Then, and this is where it gets even more troublesome for me, he then looks at classical music, and because classical music's written down, and because you have to sort of come out with it on the page like this, he assumes that that must be the product of crystallized intelligence. Now, I would argue against that saying, I think most great musicians are doing exactly the same thing. And what happens is, from a mysterious place, which nobody understands, the music sort of just arrives, right? And then the skill to be able to get it out there is the technique. And you could use the word method to describe the technique. Now, for some musicians living at the time of Beethoven and Bach, the way music was recorded was by writing it down. And that meant you needed a whole bunch of skills. More than just, knowing your theory and knowing how to write music down, but you would have to know how an instrument works. You would have to know the range of that instrument. You would have to have harmonic structures so you could communicate structures to musicians that they could also study. Right, so there's no point in having some scale if a musician hasn't practiced that scale and is aware of the notes that you are about to write with. Okay, if you're making your own music, once recording was made, you no longer needed necessarily to be able to write music down to record it. You could just switch a tape player on and stick a microphone up. And at that point, anybody can sit at a piano and plop, 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 plop. But as long as they think it's great and they have a reason for doing it and they record it and put it out into the world, that now becomes art. But my argument is to try and divide between these two aesthetic processes is bonkers, really, because I think when you come down to it, art must always be coming from the same place. So what Beethoven's doing is exactly the same as what Bob Dylan is doing. I truly believe that. Now, all of these things I'm discussing here require an hour-long video. This is why I have this channel, so I can crack open one of these ideas and discuss it, because I don't think anybody is, and I don't think anyone has the framework with which to discuss art and creativity. And I think that is why the West is in the crisis it's in. And if we do not sort it out, we will become a sort of totalitarian autocracy where art is prescribed and you just do the thing that the powers that be told you to do, and then you present it and everyone goes, that's great, that sends out the party message, very good, you have done the right thing, you know, and it'll all get like that. And this idea that society will be able to move forward because artists will come out with new aesthetic frameworks that will renegotiate what beauty is, right, which I believe is fundamentally where our ethics and morals come from, right, that will no longer happen. So this is very, very important, right? So I think the problem with Rick's 10-minute video is he stumbles into an area, he throws it out there, it's a very interesting discussion. He has definitely identified something which is very interesting, but it is not dealt with. So I am now going to deal with it after 20 minutes of just sort of rubbishing his video. When I'm not rubbishing it, there were some very inspirational ideas on there for me. And this is why I'm now making my video. And if Rick wants to watch it and then he wants to go, I'm going to now answer Andy's video back on my channel, and he can come out and sit down in his big studio. I mean, I've got quite a big studio now. You know, Andy's got quite a big studio. Maybe he could, you know, I could bring him into the big studio, you know, club with me, and then he will tell everybody about me, and then the whole world will go, ooh, Andy Edwards, let's see what he's up to. And they will go across to my channel and go, ooh, he's a bit like a British Rick Beato, isn't he? But he's got a bit of a wacky sense of humour, hasn't he? He's a bit surreal, isn't he? I'm not sure if I like it so much now. You know, and he seems a bit sarky to me as well, that Andy Edwards. That Andy Edwards seems a little bit, I don't know, and he thinks he's clever, doesn't he? He thinks he's clever with all these silly voices and pretending he's somebody else, talking about himself, going into the third person. I mean, Rick Beato has no need to go in the third person, so why does Andy Edwards have to go into the third person all the time and pretend he's somebody else talking about himself? That seems very arrogant to me. He's an arrogant man, that Andy Edwards is, and he thinks he's all postmodern and meta because on his videos he actually rubbishes himself by standing outside himself and then rubbishing and criticising himself like an outside observer, thus showing the structure of a YouTube video and making you aware of it and alienating you from it, so you actually question the very nature of a YouTube video, which is very, very clever, and Rick never does that. But Andy's very, very clever, and I don't like it because I don't like clever clogs. He's one of those English clever clogs, isn't he? He's an English clever clog who thinks he knows everything and thinks he can sit there all smug with his English accent, saying things that sound all very clever, and then he just does that. He doesn't do any clever editing on his videos. He just sits there, goes off the camera, rants away, and then he throws it up online and he thinks everyone should bow down and think he's bloody brilliant. And if you do criticise him, he'll have a go at you in the comments. So what happened, I think, is if we go back to the Second World War, it was an awful thing. There we go. That's Andy Edwards' wisdom for you. So a generation comes out of the war, they come back, they settle down, they're having kids around about 1945 to 1950, right? That boomer generation. They grow up through the 1950s. And because of the war, bizarrely, especially in America, Western countries actually have to go up, and that going upwardsness starts to create wealth and jobs. My parents, who were born in 1938 and 1940, said that there was just full employment by the time they left school. Just go and get a job. So these people no longer have the fear, like we do now, that they'll lose their job and then they'll lose their house and they'll end up on drugs, you know, as a, you know, fentanyl user walking down the street like that. You know, that's the world we live in now. They didn't have that. You know, the world was actually, in a way, a little bit more safer. And so they start to look around. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You start to look around then and you go, yes, I feel quite comfortable. Got a bit of money in my pocket. I bought myself a car. I've met my girlfriend, and I'm going to buy a house. It's going to take a bit of money, I've got to put a down payment of £5 down. And then it's something like, what were they saying, £6 a month to buy this house? Well, I'll do it, Let's not worry about it. I'm sure when I retire, it'll be worth £500,000 and it will see me through my retirement, unlike my children. And so they went into the 1960s with that framework. And that was when they went, well, I don't like all this, not liking black people. I mean, what black people have done? They haven't done anything, have they? And gay people, what are gay people doing that's so bad? I can't see what they're doing. And those questions start to be asked. And then the black people are going, yeah, why can't we have a piece of your rich pie? You've got a rich pie there. I want a piece of it. And then the gay people, yeah, and why can't I get married and do everything you're doing just because I'm gay? And just because I'm a woman, I want to go out and go to work, Why do you have to stick this bra on every day and go walking around with a great big... You don't have to wear a bra every day, do you? In the future, you might want to wear a bra all the time, and we will respect that as well. Let's everybody just mix all the bras up. We'll have some people wearing bras, some people... don't even think about the bras. They just burn the bras, right? So this is what happened in the 1960s. And these young people coming up, they reject the society and culture that went before, right? At that point, the only person that you can really talk to that knows what it feels like to be a young person going into this world that you want to change, right? This utopian idea, let's just build a new future, And what do young people want to do? Well, I had a bunch of young people around my house the other day. They were only young. My daughter had a party. So my old studio, where I used to do my YouTube video, cleaned it all out and I stuck it in there. And what did they do? Put music on and they got drunk. And they tried to turn it into Woodstock. That's what young people will always do. Stick old people in that room. What would they have done? They would have got some cardigans, some biscuits, tidied it up, and then sat down and read a good book or talked about how bad young people are. I mean, that's what happens. And nobody wanted that in the 1960s. So at the same time, the music industry, which had emerged in the 1920s, is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then television comes out and that knocks out Hollywood. You now haven't got the film industry anymore. And kids don't want to go to the cinema. They did in the 1950s when they were driving around listening to Chuck Berry. But they don't anymore. They don't want to go down to a coffee house and listen to someone with an acoustic guitar telling them, how their life is terrible and all that type of stuff. And so the record companies go, well, maybe we can market this up because the records have got better now. It's not like singles on the radio. We can bring out albums, can't we? And the Beatles went, yeah, let's make an album. We can actually make a proper album. And before you know it, rock and roll is dependent on young people. And what we have now is we have a music industry, or we used to have a music industry. This is now fractured, but putting that aside, if we look at the historical music industry, the historical music industry exists to like this. So the way it works is you want to sign an artist. Now, if you sign an artist, you don't want to sign an unknown artist. That's too much work. Most artists that sign deals are already established. So say someone wants to sign Tom Jones. I mean, he's 84 years old. Say I've got a record company. Somebody comes along and says, you want to sign, Tom Jones? I go, yeah, I'll sign Tom Jones. Yeah, well, that'll be all right. He is 84 though. That's no worries. Can he make an album? Yeah, I think he can make an album. Well, get him in the record. I'll pay for that. And they record Tom Jones in the studio, comes back with his album, and then you go, right, let's advertise it. So you pay for some adverts, and he goes, Tom Jones's new album's out. And all the Tom Jones fans go, ooh, Tom Jones's new album's out, I'll buy that then. And they go and buy it. That's how the music industry works. So if you think of it as catering for all these generations, right? All these generations are like coming in like this. And I'm listening to my Led Zeppelins and my Black Sabbaths, and the ones who are a bit younger, they're listening to their Radioheads in Nirvana. And, you go back, there's people going, oh, I remember S Club 7, they were bloody brilliant, weren't they? Oh, God, that was when music was good. So this is the way the music industry works. Then the music industry goes, look, how are we going to create the people later on that will only buy S Club 7 albums? We need to keep it going, really. Well, why don't we invent this new thing? What's that? Well, why don't we mark it around a chart? We'll have a chart, and that will just have new songs coming out. And we will say, oh, everybody's listening to this new artist. And we will push these young artists onto young people. And by doing that, we will be continually creating the next wave of consumers. Well, what sort of music do young people like? Well, I don't really know. Well, go and find some then. So I know songwriters that were working in the popular music field. that would get hired, and they were like in their 30s or 40s. They would get hired, or even 45. They could have even been 50. The age didn't matter. They would arrive at some little recording studio, and they would start to develop their songs, you know. So this is when you've got some, 40-year-old bloke with acoustic guitar going, I'm just a girl from a lonely place and I want to get out and rock and roll. You know, they're coming up with this thing about this young girl, but they're not a young girl, they're an old person. And so they're there, and I've been told that some record companies or publishing companies, what they would do, they'd get that song demoed, and then next door they would have a reservoir of kids. The kids are on there playing their computer games and doing all that, and they're TikToking, like TikTok, they're doing all that, right? And then they would say, kids, gather together, come on, gather all together, we got some vapes for you. They all start vaping because kids love vaping. And so they're all vaping away, and they play them the songs, and they give them a piece of paper, say, which one's your favourite one, right? And then they get their favourite one, they go, right, now go and sign someone who looks cool. Kids, who looks cool? She looks cool. Can she sing? Not really, but she does look cool. Oh, it doesn't matter if she can sing or not, because we can do that on the old auto-tune, can't we? Come on here. Young lady, come on in. You're going to be famous. We've got this song written by the old man. It's all about you. Can you sing it for us? That is the state of the modern music industry. So when we start to talk about the music industry, it's inherent that young people will be represented through that time because it had to be that way. But it does not mean that creativity is the domain of young people. Now, I get onto my contentious point. If we see that period that came out in the 1960s, which was all utopian and freedom and love, and let's help all the people who belong to identity groups because they're not getting a fair share, blah, blah, blah. And then those ideas slowly get put into law. They have a great effect. We get the equal opportunities come in, women can get time off work to have kids, all these brilliant things that happen. And then as these comes on, these ideas, they atrophy. And they become not ideas as such, they become ideological dogmas, and they're just trudging along now. And so dogmatic are they that they get owned by the powers that be. The powers that be are now going, look, this is the way you do it. We must have equity and equality. We must have this and we must have that. And we must be like this, and this. And there's nothing wrong with having those opinions unless they cannot be questioned. And what we have seen at the end, and it's totally natural, is the end of this cycle, cultural cycle, is those that used to be seen as conservatives and now the contrarian ground rule breakers. Right? They're the rule breakers. Anybody who stands up and questions any of this, they'll go, well, they're far-right thugs. They're far-right. Now, what they are conservatives. And what conservatives do, essentially, is they champion the conservation of certain ideas because they think they're worthwhile. Let's not break that system because it works. And that system seems to be all right. I know it's not the best, but it's okay. Let's just try and conserve it and just get the best we can. And then the young revolutionaries, because that's what it is to be young, they've come up and they want to change the world. No, we need to tear it down. We need to all live in communes. We need to all wear the same suits and eat the same things, and it will be much, much better. We'll all get along. All my friends get on, and we go down the park and get drunk, and it's brilliant. We try and turn it into Woodstock. Can't we just have Woodstock across the whole world? And that has become the dogma. So how do you challenge that? You challenge it by opening up the world to new voices, contrarian voices. You have to swallow the pill of having, or the bad medicine, as John Bon Jovi once told us. No, it's a good medicine, isn't it? You have to swallow unsavory opinions again. You have to have someone saying the equivalent of now of the person saying, I think homosexuality is absolutely okay. It's not, it's disgusting, and those sorts of people are absolutely disgusting. They're not. What are you trying to say? Are you disgusting like them? You should be stuck in prison like them because they're disgusting and you're disgusting. And where did you get this idea of disgust from? I got it from art and music. That's what tells you what's disgusting or not. And I read a book and it was explained how awful these homosexual people are. Well, they're actually not. And I have written a book which explains why they're not. And what it does is it puts the point of view of this homosexual person at the front so you can see what it's like to be them. What they have feelings, we can find out what it's like to be them. Yes, but you're going to have to swallow some unpalatable things. I was reading Junkie the other day by William Burroughs. I mean, that was all about him being a junkie. I mean, who would have thought that a book would be written about being a junkie? Well, it is called Junkie, isn't it? I know that, but what's the point in it? I'm not interested in knowing what he's on about. And what about old Jack Kerouac? He's just like some blues are going off and we should go and get a junkie. You can see the point I'm making. You have to open up yourself to these new ideas, however unpalatable they are, which means you have to spot where they're being pushed down and where the people are saying, that's a disgusting idea, you should not be saying it, people should not be allowed to hear that sort of opinion. And you have to open yourself up to all sorts of unpalatable opinions. We can go back through the history of rock music and we can go through it, and I can pull out 1 million albums that are putting pretty unsavory opinions out there, right? So it could be from that point of view that if we once opening ourselves up to the opinions of young people, which we used to ignore because they thought we didn't think it was valuable, maybe it's a time for us old people to stand up and have our opinion, and maybe somebody might actually listen to us, and we won't, like in the old days, when the wise old man would sit in the village and they go, I don't know how to do this, let's go to the wise old man because he knows about stuff, because he's been around the block. He's got all that crystallized intelligence there, he has. But Rick Beato said that's a waste of time. Well, of course it's not. You know, he has got something to say. We all have got something to say. Open up your ears, open up your eyes, put yourself arms around the world. Let's all embrace, we're all human beings. Let's try and get on. Now, how do you see the world? And respect it, including the old people. We still have got something to say. We are still relevant. You know, we should still be listened to, and we shouldn't be put in the carousel on Logan's Run like the young people want us to do, especially as old ones who are a little bit racist and a bit sexist and a bit stuck in our ways and think bras should be used only in one way. And I mean, I know it's terrible, but that's the way I see the world. Don't kill me. Got to the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching this video. Thank you very much for getting through that rant. I know that there's an audience there for my rants. And again, crystallized intelligence. The more I rant and the more you like it, the more I refine my ranting. If you look at rants from a couple of years ago, I was terrible. Now, I mean, what am I going to be like in 3 or 4 years' time? I'm going to be like the Mozart of ranting. That's what I'm going to be. Anyway, so if you want to help me with the ranting, the easiest and quickest thing you can do is stick a like on it. And YouTube told me, it said more people are interacting with your videos and recommending them. And so I assume that means that they're putting likes on it. So go on, put a like on it. Go on, put a like on it. And if you really want to support me, it doesn't matter whether you want to see my videos or not. You know, if you're a YouTuber, everyone goes, oh, you're a YouTuber, yeah, how many subs you got? I've got 41,000. Oh, that's quite good, but so-and-so's got more. I know they got more. So if you could just subscribe, it won't matter. You could subscribe to 1,000 channels. It won't make any difference. In fact, if you subscribe to all the channels on YouTube, you'd be in the best position, wouldn't you? If you think about it. Because if you only have a few subscriptions, you're just going to be down this old man's echo chamber. And we don't want the old man's echo chamber. We've just done a video on that, haven't we? Come on. Subscribe. Or old lady's echo chamber. You know, I'm not a sexist. I don't care what you do with your bra. So, if you want to know, if you want to join the Andy Edwards Club, who would want to join that? You can come over to my Patreon. The link is down below. You can become a free member. I just did a video for the free members, a proper little documentary that looked at the origins of prog with examples. Not like here where YouTube comes and tells you off, with examples. Right, don't tell anybody. Right, and or you could support me there and become a paid member. Once you get there as a free member, you realise it's better to be a paid member, and then you might put your hand in your pocket. But if you want to put your hand in your pocket but don't want to be a free member, then what you could do is quite simply put a little bit of payment in my PayPal tip jar. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.